Okay, Leroy, today's question comes from a good friend of ours. Verna, thank you so much. I miss you. Can't wait to see you next. Ignorance is bliss. What do you reckon, Leroy? Is it?
Oh, a very thought-provoking question here, Verna. Look, ignorance is bliss. We can't dispute that. Like when you don't know something about something, it's not in your mind. And like what we say, out of sight, out of mind, and that is blissful. But to say if that's a way of living, I would dispute it to say no, it's not. It's not a very good way to live with the ignorance of bliss attitude because fundamentally just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it's not happening.
Mm.
And we can see
Yeah.
this throughout history, throughout everything in this world right now, especially right now.
Mm.
Just because you close your eyes to maybe what's happening in America doesn't mean it's not happening. You close your eyes to what's happening in Turkey right now. Oh, okay. Because it's not because I don't know about it, that means it's not happening. But for the matter of fact, it is. So in that sense, ignorance isn't bliss. But yeah. So maybe let me just put out why I think ignorance is bliss and like the advantage of it being bliss.
Yeah.
So I would say when you're ignorant of something, it helps you in a few situations. For example, when you're tackling a challenge,
Mm.
because we all, especially myself, like I can talk myself out of anything very quickly. And the more information I know, the likelier I am to talk myself out of it. For example, like starting this podcast. Well,
Yeah.
when we started, we kind of just like knew what a podcast was. We didn't know like you had to like, set up an Airbnb and like all this extended like solid work you have to do outside of the actual podcast. We didn't know that.
Yeah.
But if we
Yeah.
did, maybe in our situation, we still would have propelled forward. But if I was by myself, I definitely would have been like, can't be bothered. So in that
Yeah.
sense, ignorance is bliss. Just
Mm.
because our ignorance to the constraints and challenges we would have to face along our journey
Yeah.
would have
Might have not
helped.
taken that first step.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so in that situation, I think it's bliss. Um, it can make life a bit more guilt-free. So for
Mm.
example, if you're really dieting or whatever, and you're sort of counting your calories, oftentimes you would be like very stressed about what you eat and be like, oh no, I'm at 3,000 calories for the day. I can't have a single meal anymore. And it's like 10 a.m. I don't know how
Yeah.
you get to 3,000 calories at 10 a.m., but some people do. And by not knowing exactly what like your calorie count is, it can make your life a bit less guilt free.
Yeah.
And that being said, like being guilt free isn't necessarily always a good thing because guilt is like is a measure and a check to make sure to make you aware that like maybe what you're doing isn't technically morally right to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think those are a few times when ignorance is bliss is a good thing, but the negatives still outweighs the positives for me.
So just before we go on to that, just to define ignorance as bliss, essentially it's not having an understanding or being able to grasp a concept of something that's happening. And so you're just deciding that, you know what, I'm happy not knowing this information. I'm happy not learning it. As opposed to if ignorance wasn't bliss, you would find something that you don't know and then you would learn it. So you're just happy living in this kind of fake little reality that everything's all sweet and that you can just kind of ignore, the good, sometimes the bad. And then just, it's kind of like, because I think something I struggle with is what ignorance is bliss actually means.
Mm.
Like it's three words, but yeah, they get said all the damn time, but I don't know what that means. Like there's bliss, ignorance. Like I feel like they're two different things. But for me, the way I can kind of grasp it in my head is choosing whether or not to care about something.
Yeah, that's I think fundamentally it. Hey,
Mm.
whether or not you feel the right to care, or like not feel the right, feel what you said, whether
Mm.
you care or not, if it's worth your time or not.
Yeah. You can apply that to so many world scenarios, like some really serious things and some really simple things too. Pretty much exactly like you said.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what would be one thing that you are blissfully ignorant of at the moment?
Mm, so I would say, even though I said before, like it's not necessarily good to be ignorant about the world's plights at the moment, but I have essentially hopped off social media and all like stopped watching news just because like the news was just making me feel horrible.
Mm.
And in that way, I'm being a bit ignorant to what's actually happening in the world. I'm fully aware of what's happening. Don't get me wrong. I still see it and hear about it, but I'm just not absorbing it every day just because like I'd wake up, maybe scroll Reddit or watch the news, and then I just hear some shit that's just happened. And
Yeah.
there we go. My day is ruined.
How, in terms of ignorance being bliss, how much do you think someone's capacity to change that thing weighs in on on their decision as to whether they care or whether they don't care?
Oh, tenfold. I think your capacity really changes how much you care because yeah, exactly. Like let's say uh, a super cyclone in Thailand in a small remote village that you can only get in on a bicycle.
Mm.
Like you're gonna be like, oh, that's shit. But at the same time, there's nothing I can do. So
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
you later. But and
Yeah.
then something on your own home turf, like maybe that sort of all the oiling they were going to do around Australia, like that was going to positively impact you if like an
Mm.
oil spillage happened, like the beaches would be fucked, the animals would be fucked. So you saw how many people like, stood up and change that because it was on their home turf and you can actually, your actions therefore could make the change. So I think that's a big factor.
Mm.
That's a huge factor
Because I
because
guess if someone sees that they can have like a tangible effect on something, they can physically try and control this thing. They can put some effort in towards causing something to happen. But if it's the let's say for example it's same scenario, all these oil rigs in Australia, but instead it was over in another country. Like even though they're the same thing, I guess we would have more, I guess, even a margin more capacity to take action and change this thing, as opposed to over there, we got nothing. There's nothing you can do about it. So it's much easier to just be like, you know what, blissful ignorance on that one. But essentially, it's the same thing here.
yeah,
We're all sharing the same world, but we can affect this one. We can't really affect that one. Like that's what I think, that how much you can actually impact and action on something will influence whether you perceive something to be, yep, I understand that's happening, but I don't care, or you would care.
yeah, without a doubt. It's a tricky one because yeah, there's just so much happening in this world, and
Yeah.
it just depends who if it impacts you or not. And even then, it's like when it does, like what can you do? It's just that
Yeah.
feeling of like hopelessness,
Mm.
which also drives people to say like, yeah, you know what, ignorance is bliss.
Mm.
But
So
yeah,
it fits in really well with some scenarios, but then it doesn't fit in some scenarios with that are quite big too. I guess like one big example for me that sticks out like a sore thumb would be, taking care of the environment.
mm,
There just seems to be a whole general concept of someone else will do it. But if we all take that same persona, nothing's going to happen.
yeah,
And we're going to keep racing towards problems. But I guess people seem to be able to live in blissful ignorance that that we're destroying this planet. But I think that I think one thing that could weigh into that would be they feel that they can't impact it at all. But the thing is,
Yeah,
if the whole population takes that view, of course something's going to happen, you know. And then in all these little things, you know, it's made up by individual efforts kind of coming together as a collective, not just one person.
exactly. The same as voting. Like you're like, oh, what's the point of me voting? This one vote isn't really going to change anything, but it's that
Mm.
collective,
Yeah.
that
And that's where
compounding
I
effect.
think that's where ignorance being bliss can be quite a negative, because it gives people, you know, an escape, you know, a reason to not care about things that are impacting them and that they're contributing towards. So I guess for me, if I had to give my total summary of the whole concept of ignorance is bliss, I think it's a negative thing,
Mm,
but can be used as a positive thing if it's impacting you really badly. You know, we can live by not worrying about something. But if we all don't worry about something, then we're just going to keep creating more problems.
yeah, spot on, spot on. Yeah, I think in another situation where I've seen ignorance is bliss as a negative thing is just it can make you really unaware of, like cultural differences or how to act around people. Just because some people like, like say someone's like got a mental illness and you're just very like ignorant to mental illnesses, and then you could really beat down on that person by saying horrible things about their illness and not be aware of like how your things will impact them.
Mm.
So I think it's good to be like ignorant sometimes, but I think there's a few things in life that aren't good to be ignorant about.
Mm.
And one of them is, yeah, so like when it comes to how if it impacts someone like directly. So maybe like gender specific, race, um, mental like illnesses and stuff, like because it's we all owe a responsibility in this world to sort of have an idea to some degree of how what we say and what we do can impact others. Maybe that's just
Mm.
my own view, but I'm a strong believer in that because in the end, it can just be horrible. Like some of the things people say, and like
Mm.
they might just think it's not bad, but it can ruin your whole year. It can ruin your life sometimes. It can ruin the way you see things or do things. So like I
Mm.
think in that sense, it's good to be like just a bit of awareness around you about like, and that
And
could be like very contextual where you live.
yeah,
I think it's good to be aware like that.
yeah. I think just to summarize, I think all of your thoughts would be you have to be aware of the impacts it has on the people around you
Yeah,
and yourself, I guess. And that way, at least you know you can be ignorant to the issue, but you can't be ignorant to the impacts that it has on the people and things that surround you.
yeah, I
Hmm.
think that's
Well,
it.
I tell you what, that was a tough question.
That was tough. Got me
Well,
thinking
thank
there.
you.
Thank you, Verna.
Yeah, thanks, Verna. That was a real deep thought provoker. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next time.
See you later.